afternoon, everyone. Well, I certainly feel that the last day and a half has been really almost entirely about innovation. So it's my real honor to host these innovation experts to talk about the changes that we've seen in this industry, and indeed the changes that these folks suggest, or these gentlemen suggest, will happen over the next 10 years. Why don't I'll jump straight in and start with a topic that was mentioned by Toby Green at Active Network earlier, the evolution really of event technology from registration, which is what people principally think of as technology in sports, to this concept of marketing tech or MarTech. And really interesting to see the stat that 6 years ago there were 150 companies serving the space, and now there are 5,000, and I certainly didn't know that. I'll throw the question to Mohammed first. Your view on marketing tech and what that's doing for our space.
Yeah, so we've absolutely seen that evolve over the last, I would say, 6 to 8 years significantly. One, roles within the organization themselves has evolved. So before you might have had a CMO and a CTO, and we've seen those two roles converge within organizations. So you might have, a CMO and a CTO as one combined organization, but in most cases they work very, very closely together. And that goes back to what we've heard throughout this conference, intelligent marketing. And understanding data, understanding the role that CRM plays, and bringing context. So it is not just about knowing and sending out a post-race email to every single runner, but it's what happens between the events. And I think MarTech is a really key role there.
SANCHIT, your view?
Yes, so I think it has evolved a lot in the last 8 to 10 years. So if we see, and now like we are discussing about integrating registration system, timing and photo pictures with the CRM, and sending out personalized emails to the runners throughout the year, like, hey, this was my timing last year, right? And how can you upgrade your timing this year? How can we educate you? So sending out very personalized communication, I think it's changing a lot, yeah.
So Mohammed, we talk about that as example of best practice, but in your experience when you meet with event organizers, how many are actually doing this at the moment?
I think very few are doing it well, and part of that is because there are so many tools out there, and I think we saw that stat that Toby had up earlier in terms of how many technology companies. He mentioned a large event, I believe, that had 350 digital products that they're managing in-house. That's not even possible. I mean, effectively, you can't manage 5 as an organization. So I think there's very few events that truly have the resources in-house with people and with technology to effectively do that. Now, we've seen some successful ones do it. We've seen, the TCS, New York City Marathon, I think does a phenomenal job in that. We have David here from Spartan Race. I think that has also really leveraged the MarTech role well over the last couple of years. So there are more and more coming, but there's so much information out there, and as an event organizer, I think it's been difficult to know, well, now what do I do with it and how do I make sense of it?
So you've touched on, and I'll go back to SANCHIT, you touched on there some very large organizers that are adopting this, like Spartan, TCS, but the vast majority of the market and many folks that are here today are not of that size. They don't have that scale or those resources. What's your recommendation for a smaller event to think about MarTech?
Yeah, so as Mohammed mentioned, that for big set of organizers, it's really easy to do because they have big teams, right? But if we talk about smaller scale organizers who are organizing runs of like 1,000, 2,000 or of that scale, I think it's still, there is a need to integrate systems and make it plug and play for the organizers who are not so tech savvy, and make it easier for them to integrate timing systems, registration system, photos, and BIB Expo software, everything at one place, which makes it super easy for them and cost effective as well. I can't use Salesforce, right? It's a very costly software. Mm-hmm. We need to have CRMs integration at a lower cost so that even the smaller organizers can use MarTech.
Absolutely. So the goal, of course, of MarTech is more engagement. Michael, your experience, I mean, results. We heard yesterday, I think, that at least from some of the speakers, that the most engaged day with their audience is the day after the race. Obviously, that's a major part of what you guys do at MYLAPS. Can you touch on engagement technology?
Yeah, if I can have one more comment on what we just discussed, that it sounds all kind of spooky there's a lot of out there, but the good news is when there's a lot of out there, and it also becomes a lot cheaper. So it's definitely, and that was in the session that Mike just did, his workshop. You also need to try. You know, you need to have the basics, but when the basics is there, you need to try and learn because there are endless possibilities. When it comes to the engagement side, as you mentioned, we still typically see that once you, Michelle yesterday mentioned the live tracking in the TCS app. Once you have that in place, race day itself is absolutely the number one day when you have engagement with your audience, and it's runners and fans. More and more like photo and video content, companies are now also able to produce that faster. To basically do it live in real time. So the more able you are to push that content in that live day, race day area, then you have a winner in place, and then you see the day after that that it dies down already, because you need to be there once the audience is there, and you need to give them content to share when it's meaningful for them, and that's typically on race day.
And we think about the themes of this conference, and this is really about bringing together best practice in the industry. What's an example for you of best practice with engagement or engagement technology?
I think the basics for a lot of events is already using your data for a live visibility, so live tracking. But from a sponsorship side of the business, the video that I showed yesterday with being able to target your friends and family members on social media without you as a runner knowing it, and have a surprise video when you need it the most during the race. It brings tears in people's eyes. I've seen it a couple of times now at various events. The reaction of people, they're lit tears in their eyes. They basically run back to see if they can watch the video again. That's a whole new dimension. But also, using new technologies like NFC, incorporating in medals. As long as you keep innovating and keep thinking of solutions like that, how it can enhance the experience, I see more and more of those technologies being used.
So touching on the subject of innovation there, Shannon, when we were discussing this panel beforehand, you were speaking to some of your experience in sports, but outside of maybe the sports events that most of the people in this room are familiar with. Can you touch on the kind of innovation you're seeing?
Yeah, I think given we only have 20 odd minutes, I'll probably stick to an experience I had this year. I was lucky enough to go to China to spend some time with Alibaba after their sponsorship of the IOC, a 12-year deal, basically to provide technology services and cloud services. And I think I've got probably three things that I learned from there, but the major one I saw was the smart city brains throughout China that they're implementing. Quite incredible technology, and I think that can have some real implications for major events, in particular mass participation, in the way that they can track live data around when emergency management is needed, when traffic breaks down, these sort of things. They were able to reduce traffic flow by up to 50% in major cities by using live data from over 3,000 cameras in the city, Alibaba data through their phones, but also with government data too. Quite incredible stuff, and I thought that was a major thing that, although it's China and the data regulations are very different in how they can implement these things, I thought when I was looking at it, major events could really benefit from something like that.
Absolutely. Mohammed, you see a lot of innovation, right? You're working with really interesting brands as well as events, and I'm conscious that events aren't the only audience we have here. Maybe you can touch on some of the innovation you see in other parts of the sports industry.
Yes, I think with the theme of this conference being mass participation, we do work with several very interesting brands, and one of the big ones going into 2019, we're actually working with 5 different brands, SoulCycle being one of them, where we're bringing this technology at home. And the reason for that is to make sure that that consumer is a part of the experience, not just while they are at the event, but while they can also enjoy that experience at home as well. So in 2019 and going into 2020, what you're going to find is a lot of experiential activations that are happening outside of the studio or outside of the event themselves. And a part of that could mean a product or service, something like a bike, where you can experience a soul cycle class, for example, at home. We're working on other projects too, where there's like a mirror or a wall that will show you a workout that you could do at home. But again, it's enriching your life, not just in the, not just while you are captured within an event or within a studio, but outside of that. A big role of that is bringing wearable technology. And we've seen innovation, and we're a part of some of that innovation in what role does wearables play. When wearables first came out a few years ago with Pebble and Fitbit, who kind of unleashed this revolution, brands were struggling to understand how best to incorporate that. How can we bring context from this wearable piece that we're wearing into the brand, and how can it help us make the connection with our consumers stronger? We're now seeing that come true. And what we've found is that rather than forcing a consumer to buy your wearable, work with what they have. So I'm wearing an Apple Watch. I see a lot of Samsung devices out here, Fitbits and so on. So with our brands, we integrate the wearables that the consumer has and bring context to that brand itself. In an example like Equinox, we might say if you're near an Equinox and you just completed a class, we can tie your device so we know, great, your Fitbit captured that you've done 3,000 steps in this class. We're going to bring that into the Equinox app. So it's more about integration than it is about forcing a consumer to buy into your specific technology.
And are you seeing that kind of integration go as far as race companies? Are there events companies that are taking the step to integrate in that way?
Well, I think just seeing the growth of live tracking and how many events beyond just the largest events in the world, but how many smaller events are trying to incorporate live tracking into the race series, I think that's the start. The second part of it is also training and building year-round engagement. A lot of brands have really tried to do that. So we look at things in 3 buckets and 2 categories. One is at the event, know what you're building the tech for. You're building the tech either for your consumer, for your partners, or something to give back data for yourselves. The second part of it is the time. So looking at the technology and how does it apply to pre-event, during event, and post-event. And if you can answer those 6 buckets, you will have a fully 360-based engagement opportunity with technology.
And MICHEL, I mean, arguably the original wearable technology in this space was Championship, some 35, maybe 40 years ago. What's MYLAPS' view on wearable technology and how events and indeed brands can engage with an audience using it?
Yeah, I agree with what Mohammed says. I think we're looking at that stage that you have two-way communication more or less with the wearable, so you can real-time get also live race data back to your wearable, so you know more about your position, all kinds of stats around in the race. So we're looking really forward to some more developments on that side of the business, because then you can add way more value to the actual participant. So we embrace that technology, and we see the value there as well. Yeah.
SANCHIT, no, there you go.
Yeah, so I can talk from developing economies perspective. So if you see in India, we have 500 million mobile users, which is growing 12% year on year. And if we compare with China, they have like 1 billion users who are using mobile phones. And if I can talk about India, because in India, there are people who never used laptops or personal computers. When they started using internet, they started using internet through mobile phones. So there is a lot of mobile penetration which is going on in the urban and also on the rural side of India. So organizers expect us to provide a mobile app to create events, and from the runner side, they want to register for the biggest ones, which have the most complex form through mobile phones. So I think there's a lot happening on that side. How can we make it seamless for the mass participative events to register through mobile phones? Yeah.
So you touch on an interesting challenge, certainly I can say it's a challenge for me as an event director, where we've had multiple people talking about CRM and the value of data and how you should ask more questions because you can learn more insights about your participants. But the more questions you ask, the lower your conversion will be in your registration. What are your recommendations or thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it becomes really important to, for example, in races, people have like, they don't register once in a year, they register multiple times. So it's really important to save their information and make it just like single click. Their card details are saved in the mobile app, and their registration details are already saved. The data is saved already in the system. They just click on pay and then they're registered. That's what we are trying to do in India.
Shannon?
I think on that capturing registration information from a workforce perspective, from events like a Super Bowl, we see different strategies of people trying to go hard. The first Super Bowl we worked on, the registration form took close to 45 minutes to complete to volunteer. I mean, it was pretty incredible, but they still had 35,000 volunteer applicants that were happy to go through that process. With the World Expo we've just launched, some interesting data was they had a similar process where you can save and come back at any time, but close to 75% of people didn't actually complete the registration form. So people are still registering their email, but nothing was happening after that. And some real success that we've seen actually is keeping it short and sharp in the initial rego, so no barriers to entry to begin with. And then when you need that information following on, I guess it's a little different for workforce because perhaps they go on more of a journey than perhaps an athlete in terms of, for major events, what they need to give you. But being able to ask questions at that specific time, it not only is it capturing the right information and you'll be able to track that you've got it, but it's also another engagement and another reach out to know that you're not pestering them for random things. You're really needing this stuff at that particular time for a reason. But you can filter in nice messages from the event, and it just proves to you that those people are going to be there and committed to you because they're continually completing steps for you.
Creating a one-to-one communication, essentially.
Correct, yeah, it's crucial.
So an overused, I think an overused phrase in this industry, but I'm keen to hear what each of this panelists' perspective is how does this industry adopt gamification better, and how do we use gamification to get better engagement, which is ultimately the purpose of many of these events, whether it's as an organizer, a rights holder, or a sponsor. I throw it out to whoever would like to take the question first. And I didn't prep them on this one, that's why there was a pause.
So I think the key there is really understanding who you are as an event organizer and what does your brand mean to your consumer. Once you understand that, you could pick 1 or 2 points that you could then start to reward on. The World Marathon Majors had a great example on the 6-star program that is gamifying the experience. So gamification people just think of it as either being a game, which it really is not. It's more about rewarding any kind of action. So if you have a brand and maybe you have a small local event series, by attending one or many of those, you could earn a reward. Or within the experience itself, what we've seen come up as activations is gamifying an event within an event. So you might have a half marathon, and within that, you might have a small leaderboard for a 100-yard dash. Right in there, you've already created an activation that could be powered with a partner, and you have also gamified that particular part of that event. So the key there is it could mean a lot. And it really varies depending on who your brand is, who you think you are, and what kind of consumer you bring to the event.
That's a great answer. Shannon, as it relates to workforce, do you see much of whether it's driving loyalty or rewards, methods of gamification for volunteer recruitment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I touched on it yesterday when I spoke about the Miami Dolphins, and Mohammed's absolutely right. Gamifying, it doesn't need to be hard. It's a very simple process, and it's just about a different way to engage and show appreciation to people. I think the Dolphins, they are probably the leader in major sporting clubs in terms of how they engage their community, and they do that with gamifying their volunteer engagement. So structuring points for every single shift that they do, more points for example, a soup kitchen, but then less points for a game day because they're trying to drive the engagement, and I think that can be used for marathons, for the 4 a.m. start perhaps compared to the 12 p.m. Finish line shifts. And these points can then be transacted within Rosterfy, within our platform, for different merchandise or tickets and things. And I think the Miami Dolphins are a great example of how they commercialize this. They now have a major sponsor for that program, and they're making revenue off this. I think the volunteers are the heartbeat of your event. If anyone has the chance to go to a Super Bowl and to see the faces and the welcoming vibe of the volunteer program, it's very difficult to capture that excitement, and I think to put a brand to that is just amazing. So gamifying that engagement is the US do it very well, in my opinion.
And you could be a good man to get some Super Bowl tickets from the sounds of it. Yeah.
You're not the only one. I've got a few, you've got a long list here. Myself on the top of that list.
Sanchit, you talked about the differences in a more emerging market. How is gamification being used in India?
Yes, so like for example, like Satara Hill Half Marathon, we work with them. So they have a very interesting model. They understand the data of people who have registered for their marathons. So this marathon has been going on for like 8 years. So if you have been running their marathon for 8 years, they give you a different colored medal, a different colored bib, so that people know that, hey, this person has. So it's like you are like an esteemed customer, right? So they are basically, they have a different ceremony for people who have been running for marathons continuously for the last 8 years. Yeah.
Great example. So the theme of this panel is innovation, engagement, and over the next decade. What are your guys' predictions about what we'll see in this space, and indeed from other industries coming into endurance sports, or mass participation sports, I should say, over the next 10 years? Michael, if I can throw to you first.
Know more and more about your customer, and not only about what they actually do, what kind of touch points that you have, but everything about their behavior. So just threw out an example that Bayern Munich is doing now already with their customers, where when you're on the Bayern Munich app and you have either a season ticket, they already know so much about you. They know what kind of car you drive, with which companies you fly, if you fly business or if you fly private with your family. So a basic journey there for a Bayern Munich customer that goes with a season ticket to the stadium. It's like, Michel, you need to leave the house now because you will not be in time for the game. When you drive towards the stadium, you need to take the A2 instead of the A4 because it's blocked. When you enter the parking lots, it's go to parking 2 because parking 1 is full. Your parking ticket is free today, brought by Audi, because we like that you drive an Audi. And they already know if you leave the stadium like half an hour after the game, or that you would like to leave in the 89th minute because you don't want to be in traffic. So that whole journey is optimized one-on-one, and this will happen with running as well. You can know so much about your runner and their behavior. Are they into tech? Are they into food? So serving the right amount of content at the right time, that will definitely be there in the coming years.
Shannon?
I think that it's incredible. I've seen this in action as well in the Premier League. Some clubs are starting to do that. But I think back to the Alibaba reference, people should keep a close eye on the technology being used at the next Tokyo Games. I believe they're going to be implementing, so that's more once they've got the ticket and they're at the game day. But I think centralizing the full journey to be able to get to that game in terms of what Alibaba are doing for the IOC is centralizing the full journey from buying your tickets within the same platform, buying your tickets, buying your flights, your accommodation, your merchandise. You can, if I saw it in real life, you can basically create a hologram of yourself and see yourself wearing the merchandise. And then with facial recognition connected to your credit card, you don't need to tap and go anymore. You just literally walk out of the store and you can take the stuff with you. It's incredible technology, but again, it's China and it's going to take time, and will it work internationally? Who knows? But that journey, I think I've seen it fail with other events around the world where it becomes a pain in the ass if you're using 6 different systems to try and register your ticket, your accommodation, different things like that. The rights holder, or I thought it was very relevant for also cities that hosted the event, they can then attach brands and sponsors to that full journey because it's giving a seamless way to get involved.
So seamless, personalized, and optimized communication. Sanchit, your views?
Yeah, so I think like as of currently we have touch points, like as Michel mentioned, like we have registration data as one, like our major touch points. Going forward, our touch points are going to increase, like in the, like when the runner is running. I was reading that in New York Marathon, so they were tracking heart rate of the runner, and they were tracking heart body temperature and everything, and which was basically accessible to the family members as well. So and that data really helps a lot in getting more sponsors, and also getting connected with the right set of like medical institutions if someone needs help. So the point is that going forward, because of IoT and VR and all of these new emerging technologies, the touch points are going to increase, which will definitely help creating a personalized and a better experience for the runners and as well, right?
Mohammed, you get the closing statement then on what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years?
Well, looking for 10 years is quite a long time, but I will say that we're seeing trends, and we've seen several trends emerge. We know that there is this growth and this attraction to go back to local, right? Doing events often in the weekends that are close to you and near to you. But there's also this drive and this desire to experience something that is beyond local. And with the growth of virtual running, I think that's going to be one area. Well, I really look at two strong areas. One is virtual running. So an event such as the New York City Marathon, Ragnar Relay did a great virtual activation last year, which was bigger than any actual Ragnar Relay event that they did. Drove people to the actual event. So by one, sharing an experience because you either cannot make it there, or just because you're curious, or because you want to be part of the whole energy and drive of that event going on is growing. And applications like Strava certainly help to bring that community together. So in the next 10 years, I really see that technology is going to help make local events more relevant and help share them more, but it's also going to bring some of those marquee events and experiences closer to the consumer as well.
That's a very exciting view of the future. So to conclude, I mean, what's a small industry, but the comments the last 30 minutes just goes to show, excuse me, how much innovation we really see in this market. Incredibly exciting times, and indeed an incredibly exciting place. This conference being focused on the Asian market. I was based here in Singapore for 4 or 5 years. I'm now over in the States working in the same industry. And even though it's still relatively small in absolute numbers, the Southeast Asian market, I see some of the most exciting trends coming from here, originating from this area. So long may that continue. And thank you, panelists, for the excellent session.
Thank you.